Icelander. If I'm not mistaken, this is also a team battle. These are two Team Runaways members, and this is the moment here where you start to look at the X and 2s. This is a time where if you knock someone out in this round, you maybe knock them out at top 8. So not only is this a wonderful matchup to watch for the two heroes, but there's a whole nother narrative happening as well.
Absolutely, and this is very different from the team kill in a sense that happened yesterday between Lucas Oswald and Pheano Black. Well, both of them are still out here, very much in contention for top 8, but as you pointed out, the winner of this match might be knocking the other one out of contention. We're going to see how this goes. So it looks like Daniel Rutkowski is going first and starting with resolving a channel like Frigid.
Interesting. Now, you talk about wanting to resolve a permanent, if you do manage to go, turn 0 first as the Icelander play here. The channel like Frigid, most often in these Icelander decks, are used reactively out of the arsenal. Why do you think he's deploying it here with his action point?
I think he wants to get rid of it. He wants to put some pressure on, well, or rather slow the Dromai down and dig for something actually threatening his center. I can't say for certain, but I think if Dan Rutkowski had a red arcane spell, he definitely would have opted to send that and keep the channel like Frigid around. So I don't think he's too happy about this, but sometimes you just have to filter and dig yourself deeper to those red arcane spells that you so critically need to get across Dromai's defenses, to put pressure on Dromai before they get to develop the board.
Absolutely. Now, Pheano there allowed the Channel Lake Frigid to resolve before resolving his own Seeker's Boots, so that he had to pitch an additional red to the cost, making 2 Ash instead of the one that you normally look at that Seeker's Equipments to use. Kind of a heads-up play from him there, letting the Channel Lake Frigid resolve before activating those Seeker's Equipment, getting 1 extra Ash. We can see a Remembrance in the hand for Pheano. We see a Passing Mirage as well. I believe there's a Mirror Guy as well, so we're going to see how Pheano now, the Channel Lake Frigid, even though it's a little even more backbreaking coming out of the arsenal, looking at a deck that likes to play a lot of red cards, this is going to be hard for Pheano to work through on this first turn.
Definitely, and no tricky furnace activations that Pheano can do. Whereas, when the Icelander responds with something like Channel on your turn, if you played a red card, you can respond. You can let the Frostbite resolve. Before Channel resolves, you activate a furnace. You get a whole bunch of resources to play through a Channel Lake Frigid. No option available to Pheano here because this Channel Lake Frigid, as you said, was played proactively and on Dan Rutkowski's turn. Now, we talk about these two players being teammates. That means they probably very intimately know each other's lists. And so I'm very, very curious as to see why Pheano brought in the Remembrance. You have to wonder, they might have tested his matchup a bunch before, and Pheano realizing that this could very potentially go to fatigue, and also bring in cards like Passing Mirage. He knows Dan Rutkowski is on the the more, I guess, traditional Bulllander list, not the full Arcane version. So he's saying, I'm going to put his Passing Mirage here. He arsenaled a Mirror Guy, I believe, saying, I'm going to put these non-Phantasm cards on the board. You have to deal with them, or all your poppers are not going to stop me.
Absolutely. Now, because there wasn't any pressure put out from Pheano there, he pitched a red, over-pitching to create an additional Ash, putting that Remembrance to the bottom of the deck. Because there was no pressure, Dan here able to develop that Cold Snap from Arsenal, pitching the Frost text. Going to be interesting. Is he able to find another Ice card to head to the pitch here? Looking like he might go for the Waning Moon. That is an instant, so we still have the action point if we want to Coronet Peak with another Ice card, keep that Channel Lake Frigid around. But first, 2 arcane damage that Pheano Black's going to have to deal with. Only AB1 at the moment represented.
Exactly, and Dan definitely wants to really capitalize on these moments where Pheano hasn't resolved any Ashwings yet. So before Pheano has any AB, Dan's saying, I'm going to try and activate his Waning Moon. It's only coming in for 2, but it's going to leak at least 1 because all you have is AB1.
And interestingly, the red card that Pheano did pitch there was the Rake the Embers on that last turn. So Rake the Embers heading to the bottom of the deck, a Burn Them All heading to the bottom of the deck. These cards that can be really critical in this matchup. But the Ashwings, not only are they a little annoying pinging for 1 damage, they are a source of major arcane barrier in this matchup.
Definitely, but those Ashwings, when you don't have something to protect them, like the Passing Mirage or the Mirror Guy, feel a lot less good because you can't really attack with them, so you're kind of just there. Whereas Passing Mirage is a very, very real threat that Dan Rutkowski he needs to decide very soon. Looks like he's decided already. He's not dealing with it. He's just sending his attack to the face, and Pheano Black seems to be posturing, all right, I'm just going to block out.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just, if you're going to send attacks at me, my Reds, they only pitch for 1. They only can block 1 of your Arcane, but they do block 3 on your physical attacks. And if you can't use them to pop, you're going to send them at me, I'll just block them and potentially fatigue you out. And maybe that's why he has a Remembrance in his list.
Interesting. So turn shipping back to Pheano. Looks like because that Arsenal was frozen from the Cold Snap, priority being passed back to Dan here. 2 counters on that Channel Lake Frigid. We are deep into round 13 here, day 2 of the National Championships. Pheano Black on Dromai at 39. Dan Rutkowski sitting at 37. Has he gained a life? He should be at 36. But at the moment, it's reading 37. So
Yep.
we got 2 counters on the Channel Lake Frigid. He's got 4 cards, and it looks like he did allow the priority just to be passed. So Dan Rutkowski is his turn now.
Very unfortunate for Dan there that he couldn't Arsenal a blue spell. He ended up having a few too many of those red attacks.
Findall's Fighting Spirit gained him the life.
Yes, he had a few too many red attacks in that hand there. So forced to Arsenal red when Pheano had no cards on his own turn. So Dan Rutkowski could not capitalize on that and actually send Arcane at Pheano's face. So that turn cycler ended up being a big win for Pheano because that was an attack action out of Dan Rutkowski's deck for no damage onto Pheano.
Absolutely. Now, it looks like there's a second Findall's Fighting Spirit heading into the Passing Mirage. Dan Rutkowski deciding, I need to get rid of that Passing Mirage, make sure that these poppers are in fact poppers. Now, the question is, the Spectra, if the Findall's Fighting Spirit, if it never attacked, that life gain probably won't trigger here.
The life gain does not happen. So it looks like they might have called a judge probably regarding this exact same judge rules interaction that we were just talking about. My understanding is that Fighting Spirit never attacked, and so the text never resolved.
Yeah.
And so I don't think he gains a life. And it looks like we are already going back to see the resolution of the judge call. And yes, it was about that. And yep, Dan Rutkowski at 37 did not gain the life from that. And here we go, back to Pheano Black. And he's saying, you just dealt my Passing Mirage? Here's my Mirror Guy. Nice bolts, nice fighting spirits you got there.
Absolutely. So this Mirror Guy going to represent no Phantasm on the first Dragon attack of the turn. A response here, this is going to be a Brain Freeze from the Arsenal fused with the Blizzard. In response to that, instant speed activation of the Flamescale Furnace. We're going to go ahead, make an Ash, get 2 resources upon resolution of the Flamescale Furnace, also critically putting a 0 cost into the pitch zone instead of in the hand, because Brain Freeze going to take a 0 cost card from the hand and put it on top of the deck if it exists.
Yep.
Looks as though Dan might be deciding if he wants to respond to the Flamescale Furnace activation with the Blizzard that he just fused with, or the Waning Moon before those resources are in Pheano Black's possession.
Yes, this is a very, very critical play from Iceland. You respond before the resources come online, and we already know the Arsenal, there's going to be no more taxation, so the 2 resources after the Arcane damage has already been dealt, it's unlikely Pheano will be able to use them. Maybe sometimes maybe resolve a big dragon, but usually you just have the 2 resources. You're not paying through any disruption. You didn't get to pay for Arcane. Now, curious that he decided to pitch the Sigil instead of playing it out and then pitching something else in response to a Furnace, because the Sigil itself is also an instant along with the Furnace, so he ended up choosing to pitch it. Now, he did end up using those 2 resources for the Uvia, and now we're going to start the Ashwing train. We spoke about how he only had 1 AB, but now he has an Uvia that's going to be spitting out Ashwings at a remarkable rate, because in a matchup like this, Pheano Black is never going to be short on Ash. In the previous matchup, we saw him in a very disciplined manner build up Ash against the Dorinthia, but Iceland is sending Arcane at you all day long. You pitch Reds to block that, you're getting Ash all over the place.
Absolutely. So those 2 resources up off of the Flamescale Furnace, they're critical to developing the Uvia and to create not only Arcane Barrier, but here's a little bit more damage. This one will have the Phantasm because the Mirror Guy has already attacked on the turn. You have to see if Pheano wants to send the one in, if potentially Dan's been holding a popper back this whole time. The answer is, let's just keep it safe. It's only 1 damage. I don't want to worry about a popper. Time to just arsenal up. What we saw was, I believe, a Thamai, a critical card in the matchup, because the dragon, it's the dragon that says, you don't get to play anything on my turn, wizard. You stop that. With
all the Oasises and the Sand Covers and the Thamais, you have to wonder how much these 2 have played this match against each other. That Pheano is this teched against Iceland. A lot of the other Dromais have been cutting, a Thamai here and there, or a Sand Cover here and there. Pheano saying, nope, 3 each of everything. Don't know how many Thamais he has. I definitely saw 2 yesterday in his game against Lucas Oswald. So 2 Thamais, 3 Oasis, 3 sand Covers. A lot of respect being given to Icelander from Pheano's side.
Absolutely. Pheano Black sitting still at 39. Dan Rutkowski down to 34. Both players here at 10 and 2. And it looks like this might have still actually just been the end of Pheano's turn. He did go ahead. Oh, no, this was the attack of the Command and Conquer into the Uvia.
Absolutely. So Dan Rutkowski saying, I do not want you to be spitting out Ash Rings. Now let's see. I mean, if Pheano responds with another Uvia or a Rake the Embers, Dan might be regretting sending that attack at an Uvia when Pheano is going to spit out a bunch of Ash Rings anyway. Looks like that's not happening, at least as of yet. So Dan has a few turns of relatively low Arcane Barrier on Pheano Black's side, but this board is getting scarier and scarier, Sam.
Absolutely. Here comes an Asvali onto the stack. Hasn't become a dragon yet. Still an Invocation targeting one of Pheano's Ash. Daniel does have the chance now to respond. Create a Frostbite. Play something out of Arsenal. Perhaps it would Brain Freeze. Doesn't give a Frostbite, but still has a disruptive effect. See if the priority continues to be passed. And then here's that thing. Dan knew about about that, Thamai. It was revealed off of the Brain Freeze, so here comes an incredibly critical dragon. Let's see how Dan wants to respond to this.
And Thamai, when you have a Murgai on the board, Pheano is free to attack with this 3-attack dragon because of the Murgai. The very critical dragon that you normally wouldn't want to attack with, but Murgai is protecting it. He's saying, all right, here you go, Thamai. You're fully protected. I'm going to send you into the fray once it resolves. It looks like it has resolved. Dan Rutkowski passed priority, and now Pheano knows he is home free. No disruption can come out of Dan Rutkowski at this point. No Blizzard, nothing from Arsenal, not even an activation of Tunic to stop arcane damage from the Azvalai that you can expect is going to come out.
Absolutely. So Dan going to have to deal with that on his own turn. Seeing the Winter's Grasp there, just an interesting ice card being put into these Icelander decks. You have to imagine if they're ever being grabbed off of a Codex of Frailty, but followed that up with the Ravenous Rabble. Here's another attack for 4. No Phantasm because this is just a Ravenous Rabble. Coming in for 4, revealing that Rake the Embers on the top of the deck. Another critical card for the Dromai here.
Absolutely, and Winter's Grasp, curious to see it being blocked here. I think that pretty much telegraphs that Dan Rutkowski has a different way to deal with a Thamai on his own turn, because the primary reason to include something like a Blue Winter's Grasp is that it perfectly kills a Thamai because of that very critical 4 attack. So using it to block here tells us he has some other way to deal with the Thamai, because you know he's going to deal with the Thamai, otherwise the whole Icelander game plan simply does not work.
Absolutely, and a red Aether Ice Vein being committed to that Ravenous Rabble block. Now Pheano just coming in with the whole team saying, listen, I don't think you have a popper. I've seen 2 cards. You just gave me a red Aether Ice Vein. Yep. Here's a bunch more damage. Dan Rutkowski falling all the way down to 29. Pheano looking like he might be getting ready to pass the priority to the end of the turn here. That Thamai going to make sure that is a unperturbed action, as Thamai is going to keep all of his cards safe from any wizard shenanigans moving forward on his own turn.
And I really like this Murgai attack here. Now, Dan Rutkowski might have been bluffing with the blocker and the 8th Ice and trying to bait another attack of a dragon he actually wants to pop and hold a popper back. But Pheano recognizing, if Dan does that, he won't have enough cards left to deal with a Thamai. He needs at least 2 cards in hand to deal with a Thamai on his own turn. So Pheano's saying, you know what, even if you pop this Murgai, that means my Thamai is staying. So, you know, pick your poison if you have the popper, which is unlikely. And if you don't, I just got my Murgai through.
Absolutely. So Pheano Black sitting here at 39, comfortably just 1 point below his starting life total. And there is a red Command and Conquer out of the arsenal. Has to go right at that Thamai to get rid of it, because listen, we're already staring down 3 other dragons. That Thamai can't stick around any longer, or else Icelander's entire game plan is shut off.
But the Murgai is still there. And looking at Dan's list, we've seen 2 CNCs out of it already. A bit of a newer inclusion to the Bulllanders list, a Bullander list. Michael Hamilton last year during Nationals and Worlds was not running CNCs, only running the Fighting Spirits and the Wounded Bulls. Looks like Dan running 9 poppers, 3 CNCs, 3 Fighting Spirits, 3 Wounded Bulls. Murgai is saying, nice poppers you've got there, buddy. I don't care about them.
And it looks as though, if we can take a look over there at Pheano's hand, I see a Ravenous Rabble hanging out with another Thamai that are just going back and forth in the hand. Pheano able to really deploy whatever he wants here. That was just the CNC into the Thamai on Dan's turn. So do we see a second one come out? When does he decide to want to deploy that card? It's such a critical one in the matchup, looking at a board of permanents that are already established in it. Off the dome, here's another Invoke Thamai. We're going to go ahead and create that 3-attack dragon, but once again, we're going to turn off any instance as soon as it moves past the layer step.
So there have been a few instances of Dan this game where he is stuck with a red attack in Arsenal. There was a Fighting Spirit very early on the CNC, just the previous turn cycle. Let's see whether he managed to get some sort of blue spell in his arsenal this time to actually respond to this Thamai. Something like a Channel Lake Frigid, especially in a turn like this when Pheano has a board, could be very, very disruptive. Really limit the number of dragons that can actually come through. Save some of your life total, because at this point your life total is ticking down fast and you still have 2 very threatening dragons to deal with in the form of the Thamai and the Murgai.
Absolutely. Looking at 4 dragons here. Arcane threatened on that Azvalai. Pheano Black, I saw him at the top today. You know what he said to me? He said, I'm Xing 2. I'm live now, but I won't be live for long. And my friend Pheano has just 1 out from there. Sitting now at 10-2, has not dropped a game all day to put himself in contention for the top 8. The Burn Them All coming out, representing another point of arcane damage on top of this Thamai attack. 4 total points of damage. And once again, no instance whatsoever forever for the rest of this turn.
And I just want to point out that Tunic on Dan's side has been sitting at 3 for quite a while. And again, Thamaya on the board means he can't activate the Tunic on Pheano's turn to help prevent the 1 Arcane from the Burn Them All, or the 1 Arcane from the Asva is going to be coming in. So Dan Rutkowski losing value in so many ways, sending 6, 7 attacks at Passing Mirages, at Thamia's. Losing value out of the Tunic has just been stuck on 3 for quite a while. This is looking to be a bit of a pickle for Dan Rutkowski, but it's an Iyslander. You never want to discount out Iyslander. That's exactly what's brought her back into prominence in this meta. If you get complacent, if you get too confident into an Iyslander, that's when she comes back and just Storm Striders and zaps you.
Absolutely. And with that Asvalai being taken out by the Wounded Bull Popper, we're looking at a board of 3 dragons that are quite scary. But depending on if Dan Rutkowski is able to deal with the Thamai here in some way, that's going to leave just 2 dragons. One of them is a Miragai. That is a very important one, but it depends on what Pheano is able to develop from here. And if Dan Rutkowski is even able to take care of this dragon, it's going to be another big old attack. That's an Enlightened Strike. You have to imagine it's going to be looks like he's going to draw a card because at this point,
yep.
What does it matter?
7 or 5 doesn't really matter. Now, critically, these Bull Ender lists also run Scar for our Scars, so that is one of the ways. And actually, even that E-Strike, if you didn't need to use his hand to block and pop, E-Strike is another way, along with Scar for Scars, for Dan to potentially deal with more than 1 dragon per turn. But every turn he doesn't have that, and Pheano has already resolved 2 threatening dragons. This just gets worse and worse, or at best, break even for Dan Rutkowski, because another threatening dragon is going to come up very, very soon. He really needs to find those scars, those E-strikes, and be able to keep a bigger hand to actually clear the board a little more effectively.
I know so much has already happened in this game, and yet this feels like a pivotal turn. We've spent so many resources, if we're the Iyslander player here, trying to deal with the Thamais and the Passing Mirages. What is Pheano going to be able to resolve here? The first step on this turn, a Rake the Embers. More Arcane Barrier and more consistent damage that can pile up unless things like Aether Hails or Poppers are used to kill these dragons.
Very clean representation of the board state there by Pheano, putting the Dromite trigger on the stack. And now, a lot of times you might wonder, is that even relevant? And it is, especially because of the pitch card that's right there in his pitch on something like Sand Cover. If you don't put a Dromite trigger on the stack, suppose you're in a state of 0 Ash, Dan would know there's no way you can Sand Cover my thing. And it's a very, very minor thing, but I do really want to appreciate the clear board state representation by Pheano Black. It's exactly what we want to expect in this penultimate game of the U.S. Nationals. Very, very clean, disciplined play from both players.
Pheano sitting now 4 Aether Ashwings, 1 Miragai, 1 Burn Them All, 1 counter upon it, 1 Sand Cover in the pitch, 1 Flamescale Furnace being activated, another red card heading to the pitch. There's a Command and Conquer that's going to go ahead and as soon as this resolves, make 2 resources. Dan Rutkowski, as the Iyslander player here, of course, has to give permission before anything resolves.
And we might see him do the same play that he did earlier, where you send Arcane damage while the Furnace resources are on the stack. But Dan Rutkowski, again, we haven't seen him play anything from Arsenal in quite a while, and now Pheano Black has managed to resolve a Tumultai critically with the Miragai on the board, Sam. Tumultai with the Miragai.
So the 2 resources gained off the Flamescale Furnace puts you to 2. That blue card, blue billowing Mirage there, sitting at giving you an additional 3 counters. All of a sudden, 5 available to you. This Tumultai coming in, threatening to blow up those Storm Striders unless Dan's able to deal with it before the attack even resolves, which is going to cost the Storm Striders.
He doesn't even need to deal with it. He just needs to create a Frostbite, and so Pheano won't have resources to attack with it, but it looks like he doesn't have the critical... Oh, he does! He does! Okay, he has that Ice card in his arsenal, so that Frostbite is going to come out and stop Pheano from attacking with this Tumultai. Looks like he has an E-Strike in his hand, and so he will be able to deal with the Tumultai and not have to give up the Storm Striders. That could have been a very, very early... I don't want to say end to the matchup, but to some extent a functional end to the matchup had the Storm Striders, gone on that turn cycle. But Dan Rutkowski critically saving that Frostbite all for that critical last moment, and we have to respect the discipline that he had. There was that opening when the Furnace resources were on the stack where he could have done it instead. He's saying he held it. He held it all this time, and now he's getting severely rewarded for it because now he can kill this Tumultai.
These are the moments as this Iyslander player here, you have to find a way to make your Frostbites count. And on a turn where a Tumultai was on the stack, getting ready to take your Storm Striders, Dan Rutkowski finding the window, placing that Frostbite onto the board. All of a sudden, no resources left. left, nothing left in hand. That's going to do it for the turn. And we've got a Scar for a Scar to take down the Miragai. Do we have the E-Strike? Yes, we do. That's going to take down the Tumulti. All of a sudden, there's still 4 Ashwings on the board, but there are much less dragons than when this turn started.
We talked about this earlier. The Scar for a Scar and the E-Strikes, very, very critical ways Dan can, clear a board of threatening dragons. And yes, the Ashwings are still there, but Ashwings for Icelander, a little easier to deal with, because not only do they get popped very easily now that the Miragai is off the board, but also cards like Aether Hail, cards like Frosting can kill these Ashwings in the layer step as they are attacking and take away the action point because Gulligan never resolves. So 4 Ashwings on the board, yes, that's a lot of Arcane Barrier, but Dan is still very, very happy that he managed to get out of the very, very early pickle that Pheano put him in.
Yeah, we were talking about that just a couple turns ago, that if Dan is able to find a way through these Themais, then there is a window where you can start to claw through these dragons. However, now, once again, Pheano, those dragons took all the aggression. What can you resolve here? Again, step 1.
Yet another Miragai.
Another Miragai. So all of these big red attacks that these Icelander decks use to take cards out of their opponent's hand to then make the Frostbites even more threatening, they have to go at dragons so far in this game.
And it looks like, I think I saw another Passing Mirage in Pheano Black's hand, so he could double up on the anti-Phantasm board state pieces if he manages to resolve that. So that would probably mean he doesn't attack with the Ashwings, because if you attack with the Ashwings, it could get popped and you've lost your action point. You can't do the Passing Mirage. So he's just attacked with the Miragai right now without Phantasm, and let's see whether he chooses to attack with the Ashwings or whether he's just going to resolve the Passing Mirage after this.
Beautiful. I believe that's the Team Poland Frostbite represented from Dan Rutkowski there. Just one of my favorite pieces of art that's been created for this game, if I'm going to be honest. Just look at that sucker. The Cold Snap going to go ahead and target the Arsenal. No Arsenal for Pheano Black, so not going to matter. But the card being drawn, the Frostbite being created, 2 floating for a potential Waning Moon. Oh, we can target an ally with the Cold Snap, so it looks like he might be targeting down one of those allies, which is the Aether Ashwing.
So, yeah, but let's see whether Pheano even wants to attack with his Ashwings. As we talked about, he might just pitch a red to play the Passing Mirage, paying through the Frostbite. Nope, looks like he's pitching the Passing Mirage perhaps to resolve the Uvia, saying, you know what, this one Miragai is good enough. Good enough as my anti-Phantasm thing, and I'm just going to go ahead and resolve a bigger dragon. It looks like he's attacking the Ashwings first.
Well, I think that was just the AB3 of the Waning Moon, because he has all of that Arcane Barrier. So the blue card just being donated to the Arcane Barrier there, and then 3 damage from the Aether Ashwings. Daniel says, send me the bill, I'll take all 3. That's going to say the end of Pheano's priority. So now how does Dan want to respond to the pass to the end of turn here?
And I do want to call out Dan Rutkowski's Spit Zone here. When Icelander was first released, a lot of people were thinking, oh, you Frost Tags, in every single matchup. But that's simply not the case. And this pitch of the Frost Tags, Dan Rutkowski saying this matchup, if it goes long, I will lose. So Frost, I do not want the game to go long. I'm not going to bother resolving Frost Tags, ceding tempo to do something like this. I'm going to just pitch these away. I don't need this. If it goes long, I'm going to lose anyway. And I'm also going to pop your Ashwings.
Sure, and there is an Ashwing pop as the Command and Conquer going to take down one of them. 1 Miragai left, 3 Aether Ashwings. Pheano once again off of an Arsenal, going to go ahead and draw back up to 4. Dan Rutkowski left with 3 cards left here. Looks like we can maybe see an Insidious Chill, going to see momentarily. Dan's getting down to 22, almost at half health here.
So, aside from the health, what I'm a little concerned about for Daniel is the threats left in his deck. He sent so many threats at Passing Mirages, at these dragons, the Tumultize, the Miragais, is that Icelander doesn't run that many reds, and if you're sending most of your reds at dragons, how are you getting over this 34 life threshold that Pheano has? And we've yet to see all the sigils out of Pheano as well. So that 34 is actually a very fake 34. He's easily at 40 once you count the sigils in, and with that being said, maybe that's perhaps why he's opting to send his attack at Pheano Black's face, but giving Pheano value out of the armor pieces because of it.
Yeah, those armor pieces always go in front of an attack as soon as you get the opportunity to against these Icelander decks. Want to make sure you get the block value out of those cards. 4 block being presented, 3 potentially going to come over the top and bring Pheano down from that 34 to the 31 if he decides to place another card in front.
Definitely. And the other pitch zone, again, Dan Rutkowski pitching an Insidious Shield, another one of those cards that really favors the game going long. He's saying, you know what, I do not have the time. Pheano has put too much pressure on me, with that Tumulti I had to stop out of nowhere, the Miragai, the Passing Mirages, the Themais, that I just don't have the time anymore to resolve this Insidious Shield. I'm going to need to pitch this away.
Dan Rutkowski having to also finish the job against this Illusionist deck, has to make sure that there's enough damage left, enough threats to finish the job and carry him over the finish line here. 3 damage being taken over from this Feindal's Fighting Spirit. As they're discussing, that might be the end of the turn here. Pheano going to go ahead and resolve the Crown of Providence effect, bottom a card, get another one into his hand. That's going to be the pass of priority card heading to Dan Rutkowski's arsenal here. 23 life to Pheano Black's 31. Round 13, Ponkage. We are coming up on the end of this whole day.
And critically, Pheano Black with the Oasis Respite in hand. So not only does he have a fairly threatening board right now, he's also somewhat insulated from any tall Arcane Spell, at least the next one. In the previous match against Dorinthia, we spoke about how the Oasis Respite is a little inefficient in a blocking value-wise, because especially if you're higher life, you're spending 2 cards to only prevent 4. However, when you're against an Icelander who does let you use resources on their own turn, then you get to pitch a blue, AB2 of it, and still use 1 for Oasis Respite and get way more value out of the card rather than using 2 cards to only block 4.
3 damage coming in from this Billowing Mirage. It did also create an Aether Ashwing. Dan Rutkowski saying, you got it. I'll take the 3 going down to 20. Miragai coming in next. This is 1 and 2 off of the Burn Them All. 1 Arcane, 2 Physical, no Phantasm here because unlike Passing Mirage, Miragai checks for dragons, not for your first Illusionist attack.
Absolutely. So let's see whether Pheano decides to come in with the Swarm of Ashwings as well after this, or whether he wants to resolve something else while, he isn't vulnerable to Phantasm. Looks like he's coming in with Ashwings, saying, all right, if you've got the Popple, or if you've got the Frosting, or you've got the Aether, or anything to kill this in the layer step, you can do it now. I am open to it. But with the board as wide as he has currently, he is not missing that 1 Aether Ashwing too much. He is still sitting at a very comfortable AB4 after this Aether Hail pops the attacking Ashwing. And again, with that Oasis Respite, he's probably going to park in Arsenal.
Yeah, so this Aether Hail, going to have to see where it's targeting. If it is targeting that attacking Aether Ashwing, it will be in the layer step before the dragon has actually attacked. It's going to go down to 3, and because it's destroyed, the go again doesn't have the chance to resolve in the resolution step. Thus, that is going to be the end of Pheano Black's action points here. Let's see if he wants to pitch to Flamescale Furnace to create another Ash, or if he's just going to go to the Arsenal.
So he let the Frostbite resolve, which tells us he doesn't want to activate Furnace, exactly because he knows the moment he activates Furnace, Dan's going to respond to the Furnace and deal 3. So Pheano's saying, you know what, I'm just going to wait for you to activate Waning Moon, as you clearly are with 2 floating, and use my red to at least AB1 of it, whereas if I use Furnace now, sure, I get an extra Ash. Oh, no, you get an Ash anyway, but, I would just get blown out. I wouldn't be able to AB1 if I activate Furnace, because it's just going to respond to it before I get the resources.
So thinking, I'm still going to get to pitch a red, make an Ash, but I'd rather it make a life than just make resources
Exactly.
for no reason.
Exactly. Now, I do want to point out Silent Stilettos on Pheano Black's side. Now, not only does it have AB1, once you have enough Ash Wings, the AB1 doesn't really matter, but it has a critical line of text where you can pay full 3 once one of your attacking dragons gets destroyed to get your action point back. Now, critically, because of the way the layer step works, if Dan Rutkowski does something like Aether Hail on an attacking dragon, you cannot pop Silent Stilettos because the dragon isn't attacking yet. But we know Dan's running 9 poppers. So if Dan pops a dragon, Pheano Black does have the ability to activate Silent Stilettos and still swing out with the rest of the board.
We talked about trying to find enough threat density left in the deck. How about a red Enlightened Strike coming in for 7? Looks like it's just going to get a 3 block out of Pheano, maybe deciding if he wants to do anything else upon this attack. Potentially going down to 25 if he lets the 4 of this come over. Enlightened Strike, a really flexible card, something that does the same points of damage as some of the other attacks in the deck, but even though it takes a card, it can be a red, it can be a yellow. You don't have to pitch a full 3, even though it's a 2-card 7, much more flexible in that a red card can head to the bottom of the deck, as well as a yellow or blue.
We've seen Pheano earlier on in the game, very happily put 3 cards in front of Dan Rutkowski's Fighting Spirit. In this case, though, he elected to let 4 of the damage leak, and that tells us he definitely has something pretty threatening planned. He's saying, you know what, I can use my red, turn it into a block 3 on your physical attack that you are sending at me, thank you very much, but you know what, I'm going to keep one of these reds for myself because I'm about to do something to you. And if I'm in Dan's shoes here, seeing Pheano allow physical damage to come through against a Dromai, I'm not sitting too pretty. I'm a little nervous about what Pheano's about to do to me.
Talking about what Pheano's about to do here, we see a Mirage guy here attacking to start the turn. Now, have you ever seen a Dromai attack with a dragon and seem like they don't have Go Again. What could possibly be the follow-up here, Pankaj?
Definitely, I don't know, maybe it's a misplay in the penultimate round of the U.S. Nationals. Pheano Black, a specialist on Dromai. I don't know, maybe he just misplayed, Sam. What do you think?
Maybe. I don't know. Looks like there might be an instant speed effect here. We've got 3 cards in hand and one of the arsenal. Again, once you've played a red card at any point, Dromai is going to go ahead and give your dragons Go Again. So something like a Sigil of Solace might be the key to unlocking the Go Again here on the Miragai. Dan Rutkowski deciding if he wants to respond to the attack before Pheano even has the opportunity to do something like play that Sigil. But of course, in response to the Frostbite, because Sigil is an instant, we could go ahead and play it, and we can see it in the hand there, flipping around with all looks like a Remembrance and an Energy Potion. So maybe the choice not to block there was less of a decision and more of a requirement.
Yeah. Energy Potion, very, very interesting inclusion against Iyslander. It really lets you bank your resources for the turn that they try and pop off and kill you. It's a very sneaky 2 extra life that sometimes Icelanders may not account for, and also very critically lets you maybe perhaps pay to a full Insidious Chill or Aether Ice Vein taxing effect.
Going to go ahead and float the resource is Dan Rutkowski off of the Tunic, spend the resource immediately to, or on the Arcane Barrier. No, we're going to go ahead and activate the Metacarpus nodes on an Ice Bolt. This is going to send 4 arcane damage at the Miragai to get rid of it, like we've talked about in the layer step, destroying the Go Again, making sure that this might be the end of the Go Again, at least, on Pheano's turn.
And very critically, we saw Dan pick up the Silent Stilettos to read what it says, and it does say attacking dragon, and because this is very likely the layer step, Miragai is not attacking yet. Pheano Black does not have the out to activate Silent Stiletto, so yes, this will very likely just simply be the end of the turn for Pheano Black. Of course, we do know it was very telegraphed that he had the Sigil of Solace in his hand, so he will be able to do that action before his turn ends. But other than that, this looks to be the loss of the turn for Pheano Black. But this did take the very critical Metacarpus node from Dan Rutkowski. Now, not only is that a couple of extra points of damage for reach in the end game, it is AB1 that is going to be destroyed. We have a Burn Them All on the field. The only source of AB Dan will have after this is the Storm Striders, but it only has AB2. So if you want to stop 1 instance of arcane damage, you need to pay a full 2 resources to use the Arcane Barrier on Storm Striders, and that is simply just not very efficient.
We're going to go ahead now for Pheano. He's going to pitch a yellow to satisfy the cost of the Frostbite and gain 3 life off of the Sigil, going back up to 32. So Dan Rutkowski doing a good job working through those dragons, but you also have to find a way to work through Pheano's health here and get this Dromai deck down to 0, or else eventually the dragons are just going to take over the game.
And it's not helpful when they play cards like Sigil of Solace when you're trying to bring them down to 0. And yes, Dan Rutkowski, I mean, without the AB anymore, the Burn Them All still there, Asvalai still in the deck, more Burn Them All still in the deck. Dan Rutkowski is now on a bit of a clock. He felt like, he really had to deal with the Miragai, which he did because his deck has a lot of poppers. Half his reds are poppers. So he does need to deal with the Miragai, but that cost him the very critical Metacarpus node. Let's see if that bites him later on in this game.
I mean, talk about something that perhaps isn't ideal. This looks to be an unfused Aether Ice Vein. This is just 4 arcane damage, which, like we talk about, you have to find a way to work through the health, but you'd much rather have the effect on the card force the discard or pay upon taking any arcane damage. Of course, AB4 available to Pheano. We'll see if he wants to elect to use some of it.
Also, the Oasis that we know is in his arsenal. So we might see that come into play here. It does look like he's posturing to pitch the blue, so he might be doing what you suggested, Sam, and just pitching a full 4 into the AB4, because yes, this is a critical yellow Ice Vein, and maybe he's saying, I'm going to save the Oasis for a red. Nope, he's saying, I'm going to use it here. Still pitching a blue for that, though, so leaving 2 float. We have to wonder whether... So maybe he's thinking he wants to pitch a red on his own turn to create that very critical Ash. Oh, he has just more blues. This is one of those rare Dromai hands where he actually had 2 blues in his hand, hence he chose to use... He's like, you know what, I'm overflowing in blues somehow. I'm going to use one of it on your turn, one of it on my turn.
So we're going to go ahead and pitch the Energy Potion. Send that to the bottom of the deck to resolve and invoke Kyloria. Now, when you play a blue, you can play out multiple cards, but you don't get to make an Ash for playing the red. So this actually not going to go quote-unquote Ash neutral, where you make an Ash and then immediately consume it. Going to take an Ash, Pheano, going down to 2. Like you said, shouldn't have any problem pitching reds to Arcane Barrier, but want to make sure that we keep an eye on that Ash moving forward. This Kyloria representing 4 damage and the potential to draw a card on hit.
Yeah, but no Phantasm stoppage over here, no passing Mirage or Miragais anymore. And also Kyloria at 2 health, very, very vulnerable to cards like Aether Hail, which we've already seen Dan use to very, very great effect.
So, talk about making Ash. Here's a sweeping blow. This is not going to have Phantasm. We critically also have one floating, so one Frostbite won't stop this turn. Something like a Blizzard would be a lot more disruptive, but one Frostbite here not going to be enough to stop Pheano's turn. Dan heading down to 14. That life total's dwindling quicker and quicker.
And Dan does have a pop in his hand. I did see a Wounded Bull, so he's kind of at a crossroads here. You can take 3 and then pop the Kyloria, or you can just pop the first Ash Ring and prevent yourself taking 3 damage. So it looks like he's opting to perhaps pop the Kyloria, or he's going to maybe use an Arcane spell from his arsenal to kill the Kyloria. And yes, that is what's happening here. So he could have done this play on the first Ash Ring and saved himself 3 life, but he's saying, this Kyloria is a little too threatening. I'm going to spend 3 life to get rid of it. And that's really what this matchup comes down to a lot of the time. Iceland is saying, I'm going to spend my life to get rid of your dragons, because a lot of times that's what I have to do. And hopefully with that and setting big attacks at your face, I can get over your defenses.
Absolutely, and we talked about those big threats, needing to find them to threaten Pheano's life total. A Wounded Bull heading towards Pheano at 26 here. He's going to go ahead and just block 6 of it, take 2, resolve, and invoke Chromai, a critical card in the matchup.
Not resolved yet. Dan Rutkowski has a Channel Lake Frigid in his arsenal. The Chromai's on the stack. Very likely going to see it here, because this is a fairly wide board. You'd be preventing a fair amount of damage if you resolve the CLF here. Though, not ideal. The Tunic's at 2, just missing just that one extra turn, because you really want to play Channel Lake Frigid into Tunic, into Moon. But when you are at 11, you're very close to reaching the life threshold where you cannot be greedy with plays like this.
Absolutely, yeah. The Channel Lake Frigid. Oh, it's an insane. I also saw the Channel Lake Frigid.
Okay.
But it's an Insidious Shell.
Yep.
All right. Look at that.
Yep. Dan Rutkowski just pulling a fast one on us. There's the Channel Lake Frigid in his hand. I'm pretty sure I saw one in the previous turn. I don't think I saw him pitch it, but
he might have just kept it in his hand. Yeah,
maybe.
He might have just kept it in his hand. Maybe keeping it for that Tunic 3.
Yep.
So we're going to go ahead now, because the Insidious Shield just creates that one Frostbite. We can make sure that we come in with the Chromai. This is going to buy the Frost Hex as a block. 3 more damage coming from these Aether Ash Rings. Dan's headed down to 8 here. There are 2 dragons left on board, and Pheano's sitting at a pretty 26.
So Dan Rutkowski is saying, you know what, I'm going to have a CLF for my next turn, so I can spend the time right now to play out this Insidious Shield, is probably the thought he was thinking. He's saying, you know what, I'm going to clear a dragon, you're going to have a full 4 cards, but if I resolve CLF, especially with my Tunic, I get a lot of value out of it, and your 4 cards are probably going to be very, very inefficient. So that's likely the thought process is going through his head. Now, very, very critically, we have to see whether he'll be able to get full value from his Insidious Shield, because this Insidious Shield was resolved with him at 8 life.
Yeah.
And to fuse an Ice Vein, you have to keep minimum 3 cards, and with 8 life, that can be difficult to do, to say the least. So let's see whether he's able to get all 3 counters of his Insidious Shield, because that did cost him quite a bit of life.
This is the first step to maintaining your life total and keeping yourself alive. It's a Channel Lake Frigid out of Arsenal, creating a Frostbite from Icelander's Trigger. And when we've talked about using Tunic into Moon, if you grab the energy counters off the Tunic, get another resource, all of a sudden that's 1 card for your Channel Lake Frigid and your Waning Moon. The 2 cost of the Channel Lake Frigid, requiring you to have a little more than just the 1 card, but the Tunic, the key to unlocking that play. So waiting until this turn to make sure he had that available to him.
Definitely very, very effective, a very, very efficient play coming out here from Iceland. And now Pheano Black, because of the Flamescale Furnace, actually has some plays here. He could let the Frostbite and CLF resolve if he wants to, pitch 3 into the Furnace and still have 3 resources if he wants to go wide. He's looking to... A bit unclear on where in the priority we are right now, like when he's, like, has the Frostbite and Channel Lake Frigid resolved. Let's see how much he pays into the Furnace.
Yeah,
yep. Looks like he is posturing to pitch 2 red, so he's letting the Frostbite resolve, not the Channel Lake Frigid yet, pitching 2 into the Furnace, threatening 2 extra resources after the Furnace resolves. Dan Rutkowski, we've seen this play several times today already, responding to the Furnace resources with the Waning Moon activation.
So this is going to be 3 arcane damage before the Flamescale Furnace activation resolves and gives Pheano any resources of his own. But because he let the Frostbite resolve, that Frostbite no longer going to affect the turn. There's kind of a persistent Frostbite in the Channel Lake Frigid, but that means the next action only costs Pheano 1 and not an additional 2, which is critical when you have a board full of dragons. In response to the Waning Moon, just going to go ahead and...
Sigil here, which does cost him 1 because...
yeah. It would cost 1 because of Channel Lake Frigid.
No, it hasn't. Remember, we only we let the Frostbite resolve. Channel Lake Frigid is on the stack. We activated Furnace. Dan Rutkowski responded Furnace with Tunic and Moon, so Channel Lake Frigid is still at the bottom of all of that. So Sigil did not cost Pheano Black anything. And there we go. 2 floating. And those two floating very handy when an opponent has channeling Frigid on the board. We talk about the persistent Frostbite. Well, he's still coming with 2 more dragons. Dan Rutkowski now going down to 4. And we spoke about the Insidious Chill. It cost him life to bring that out. Will he have the life to get use out of it? Now, he did keep 3 cards, so this could be the first Ice Vein we see. It looks like he's holding a Wounded Bull, though, so not an Ice Vein.
This is going to be a Wounded Bull. Looks like it's just going straight at Dromai here. 8 damage. Chromai and the Aether Ashwing safe from this big guy. Pheano Black working with 4 cards, potentially a bunch of block and a bunch of life to play with here. Pheano really has been able to parlay dragon after dragon after dragon, and Dan's just been spending so many resources to clear the threats, to clear the passing mirages. Pheano looking like he might have enough life to play with to just end this game.
The early game from Pheano was very, very threatening for Dan, and yes, that's why we saw this Insidious Shield resolved so very late. A lot of the attacks going at dragons. Now, this is, to be fair, a very, very threatening turn cycle from Dan Rutkowski. He is threatening to keep the Channeling Frigid on for Pheano's turn and sending 8 damage to face. So Pheano has the option to play a little more patiently, just block out this Woundable, as we've seen him do, block with 2 to 3 cards, and just maybe pass priority on his own turn, just keeping a blue in hand, potentially to just block Arcane, saying, I'm going to wait until the Channeling Frigid thaws, and then you will still be at 4, my friend.
That last turn was really well executed from Pheano, letting the Frostbite resolve, pitching the 2 into the Flamescale Furnace to make sure we had some resources to pay for the attacks, not letting the Channel Lake Frigid resolve so that we could break the Frostbite with the Flamescale Furnace and then the Sigil of Solace to gain the life after the Waning Moon activation. That was really well played from the Illusionist player here.
Absolutely. And it looks like Pheano opting to potentially take 4 from his Wounded Bull. I think he's recognizing, he's saying Dan Rutkowski's out here is if he manages to get value from the Insidious Chill. If he gets to keep Channeling Frigid out for another turn, which is, with a fused Ice Vein, you pitch an Ice card for the Ice Vein, fuse, and then you pitch the Ice card to Waning Moon. That's how you keep Channeling Frigid around. So I think Pheano Black's saying, I'm going to spend a bit of my life and try and put some pressure on you so that you can't keep cards to do that Ice Vein, which is your only out at this point.
Now, looking at this, Pheano did donate the Flamescale Furnace to the block here, so that is not only a way to make sure you can pitch red cards somewhat at will to get Ash, that's also a way, as we've seen twice in this game, to try to navigate around Frostbites and Channel Lake Frigids here. So if there was a way for the resources to get taxed a little more heavily, perhaps the Flamescale Furnace block here in the Graveyard will matter later. We'll have to see. This is just going to be a Chromai blocked by an Aether Hail. No Phantasm because of the Mirror Guy that was just played. We're going to come in with the Mirror Guy before we come in with the Aether Ashwings because it's just more damage.
And that really shows, the Flamescale Furnace blocks really shows where Pheano's mindset is right now. He's saying, I'm going to push now. I do not want to let you keep 3 cards. I do not want to get hit by Fused Ice Vein when you have Insidious Shield just sitting there. So he's saying, I'm going to save my 2 blues. He had 2 blues in his hand, Sam, again. And this is the big dragon list. The big dragon list, unlike the more red line list, do run a lot more blues, and sometimes things can happen. These kind of things can happen. The Dromai draws 2 blues, gets to attack while you have a CLF out.
Pheano, they're only able to attack with 2 through the Channel Lake Frigid, so Dan Rutkowski has kept a number of cards here. This is going to be an Aether Ice Vein. It's going to be fused with a Blizzard, which is absolutely relevant. It's time for the first Insidious Chill trigger of the game. If this is the comeback, this is where it begins.
And very, very telegraphed that the Channeling Frigid will stay around an extra turn. And we spoke about this. This is what Dan needs to get back in the game. He is threatening at a minimum 2 cards from Pheano right now, 1 from the Chill, 1 from the Aether Ice Vein, and keeping a Channel Lake Frigid around. He is freezing Pheano Black in his tracks right now, and if he can keep this up, he might be able to get Pheano into that very, very critical Striders range. Pheano looks like he's at 22, but you're against a Wizard. You're against a Wizard with access to Emeritus, with access to Striders. Once you get onto 11, you are already feeling very, very bad.
Absolutely, and Pheano perhaps realizing I might not see another big red attack at my face on that last turn, might as well get the block value out of this Flamescale Furnace while I can get a point of life, because as soon as this frosty train leaves the station, it is liable to find its way to the victory. This is where this can change, folks.
So what Dan really needs to try and do at this point is stagger disruption. You want to stagger the ways you end the Dromai's turn. So stuff like staggering your Channeling Frigids. Now, ordinarily, staggering your Poppers is one way you can end the Dromai's turn as well. But Pheano has a Chromai and a Mirror Guy on the board, so make no mistake, this is still a very uphill battle for Dan Rutkowski, but he does have outs.
Absolutely. Seeing a couple cards there in the hand for Pheano. We can see that Remembrance that we've seen working its way through the deck. We see the Invoke Kyloria. I think that's a Yenderai behind it, so Got to find out how many pitch we can keep for our own turn. That Chroma is going to allow us to go a little wide, even without playing a red card, because of the action point upon resolution of the attack. But before any of that happens, we got to resolve the Insidious Chill trigger, and then it looks like we're taking the full 5 and then just discarding a card instead of paying 2, spending both dragons to the graveyard there. 2 more damage coming in off the Waning Moon, folks. That's going to threaten to put Pheano all the way down to 14 here. 2 counters on that Channel Lake Frigid and a card headed to the arsenal.
Once again, Pheano just showing us where his mindset is at this point. Early on, we saw him play very patiently, blocking out as much as he can, developing his board. But now he's saying, no more Insidious Shield triggers for you. I will take all your damage. I will spend my life now to threaten yours so that you cannot keep enough cards to keep disrupting me like this. And very, very critically, Pheano did have an Oasis Respite in hand. That's an Oasis Respite that he's going to Arsenal. He could have used that to stop the, to potentially get over, to block out that Ice Vein. It would have cost extra because of a Channel Lake Frigid, but he could have stopped damage that turn, choosing not to, choosing to spend his life to send offense at Dan Rutkowski.
Talk about offense. Here's an Ice Bolt out of the arsenal. That says any target, folks, so it's going to pick off the Chromai in the air. An Ice Bolt shooting from Dan Rutkowski's fingers to immolate, or not immolate, that's fiery, to freeze Chromai out of the air and then respond with that Waning Moon. Pheano heading to 13, and that Oasis Respite, yes, it could have saved the discard effect, but that's a card that you can keep in the arsenal for defense when you need it to stay alive. That's something that Dan Rutkowski is going to have to work through on the kill turn, but that's a scar for a scar. All of a sudden, those 2 dragons are off the field. We only have 3 Aether Ashwings to work with, but critically, this is where the Channel Lake Frigid dies. What is Pheano able to do right now?
But we spoke about how Dan Rutkowski needs to stagger the way he ends Romai's turns. He dealt with the Chromai and the Mirror Guy. Now his poppers are live until, Pheano just resolved yet another Chromai. Just as I was making that point, he says, no, your poppers are not live. I'm resolving a Chromai.
But here's the thing. There's no more Flame Scale Furnace. So if we're going to find Ash, we need to do it by pitching into cards or pitching multiple reds into Silent Stiletto's activation. So this is going to be a Blizzard now coming out of the hand of Dan Rutkowski. This says pay 2 resources or this attack loses go again, and it threatens another Frostbite as well, but we do have the blue to pay for it. That's massive for Pheano here.
That is very, very big. Let's see if he's able to actually threaten Dan, threaten lethal in Dan, because those Ash Wings, those are very, very scary right now. Those are, flying Kodachis coming at you and don't even cost Pheano anything once he has played that red card.
This Blizzard been paid for, so Chromai does have go again. The Frostbite also has resolved. Let's see, Dan Rutkowski has to respect this damage. This Chromai is coming in for 3. Dan's sitting at 2.
Looks like no poppers in his hands, so the only way he can snipe this Chromai out of the sky is with yet another Ice Bolt in his arsenal. But even if you kill Chromai with an Ice Bolt, Pheano Black will still get the action points, because Chromai does specify when it leaves the battlefield, you still get the action points. So looks like no popper, no Ice Bolt. Chromai is staying, so Pheano has 2 action points right now. The Flying Kodachi is coming in. Dan Rutkowski doesn't have a popper. Does he have maybe a Frosting in his arsenal? They'll get rid of just 1 of them, and then Pheano will still have 1 action point remaining. So Dan Rutkowski maybe in quite a tough spot here.
This is 3 Aether Ashwings before anything else. There are 2 cards left in hand here for Pheano Black. That Frostbite was paid for with the blue Billowing Mirage. This is just the first Aether Ashwing. Dan Rutkowski, how do you want to deal with this? Do you want to go to 1? Is there a way to threaten another Frostbite? But there are 2 cards in hand. We're going to play out an Insidious Chill from Arsenal. Ooh. This takes another card out of the hand and gives another Frostbite. But with 2 cards left in Pheano's hand, you have to imagine he's going to be able to pay through this Frostbite pretty easily.
Absolutely. And then that's just 1 card remaining in Dan's hand for blocks, and the Tunic still remaining there. Pheano might honestly be very happy that Dan gave him a Frostbite for him to pay a red into, because he's holding on to a sand cover. Pheano Black is just loaded up on defenses as he's sending his Kodachis at Dan Rutkowski. He has a sand cover in hand, Oasis in arsenal. It looks on the surface like he's a 19 to Dan. He's actually be able to prevent another 8 damage from Oasis and sand cover.
This is going to, because of that Frostbite, getting to create an Ash on this turn, critical, because Pheano's about to draw up, and if he had no Ash on his next turn. He'd have to find another creative way to get some to create dragons, but because of the frostbite that Dan just gave him, he's going to be able to at least start his turn with an Ash, and sometimes that's all you need. Going to go ahead and start the turn here. We're playing out a burn them all. That
we spoke about this. No AB1 on Dan's side. This costs a full 2 to just stop lethal. He's responding on the layer step before the burn them all trigger with the Blizzard, trying to see whether Pheano's going to be able to continue his turn. Hopefully, just using that as maybe some sort of indicator of whether he'll be able to, plan around how he blocks. But no, look at him. Yeah, he's that should be one resource represented because of only AB2. There we go. They fixed it. And Pheano paid through the Blizzard, so his Chromite coming in. Dan needs to deal with this as well. A Popper doesn't quite get him out of it because the action point will still remain.
So we've got 3 damage on the stack here. Dan Rutkowski, just 2 cards left in hand. There are 3 Aether Ashwings left on the board. 2 cards left in Pheano's hand. This is going to be paying through the Frostbite. We've got 3 Aether Ashwings coming in, folks. Dan's got only 1 card left. We're going to go ahead and activate the Storm Strides to kill the Aether Ashwing that's attacking with the Frosting, but we do have
one more action
point from the Chroma, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, we do. So Dan Rutkowski just playing to he's making Pheano work for it. He's saying, look, I'm going to do every single tool I can. I'm going to stride us out of Frosting to kill the Ash.